hippies get a rude awakening in New York. And John Candy stars as Uncle Buck, the world's worst babysitter. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
Were you going to take an attack posture with me?
Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox fight with morality and with the Vietnamese in Brian De Palma's Casualties of War. It's one of 5 new films we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our first movie is Casualties of War, and it's based on a true story of a tragedy that took place during the Vietnam War when a 5-man unit of American soldiers kidnapped a young Vietnamese woman from her village, took her along on a patrol with them, raped her, and then murdered her. 4 of the men took part in the crime. The 5th one refused to join them, and although he was powerless to stop them from doing what they did, it was his testimony that eventually sent the other 4 to military prison. The movie stars Michael J. Fox as a soldier who doesn't want to go along with the crime, and Sean Penn as the sergeant brutalized by combat, who was the ringleader for the whole episode.
This is nuts. We ain't supposed to be doing this.
Everybody else is up for this.
This is kidnapping, ain't it, Sergeant?
Michael Fox knows that what they're doing is wrong, and he says that it's wrong, but Penn makes it clear that in the jungle there's only one standard, the standard of power.
Clark got a weapon, Clark got a knife. We all got weapons. Anybody can blow anybody away. Any second. Which is the way it ought to be. Always.
Penn is so good there. I mean, throughout this entire movie, he is really so tough and so angry that it helps to convince you as to why he could force these other guys to do basically what was his idea to begin with. The bitter lesson of Casualties of War is that it's not always enough to have morality on your side. You also have to have the power to back up your beliefs. The movie's about the group dynamic in that small military unit where the veterans of combat have become so hardened that they no longer consider the Vietnamese to even be human beings. Fox is the newcomer. He's only been in combat a few weeks. He knows what they're doing is wrong, but he's outvoted, intimidated, and powerless. That process makes Casualties of War a strong and perceptive movie, although I could have done without the scenes at the beginning and the end of the film, which make the whole movie into a flashback, providing a conclusion that is so uplifting and gentle and unconvincing that it feels tacked on. I like the movie apart from the beginning and end.
I liked it too. I didn't like the setup where you see that Michael J. Fox is alive and telling the story in reflection, because that takes away obviously some of the tension.
Right.
During the piece. You know he's going to survive, and of course that's not what you know in any Vietnam situation. I think one of the problems people may have with this picture is that it is not a big-scale Vietnam epic. And with people like De Palma, Penn, and Michael Fox in it, you think big kind of picture. And it's a small, singular story, one person, one crime, which is obviously emblematic of a lot of what went on in the war. I liked it too. I thought Michael Fox did a good job in getting rid of his TV personality, his light comic personality, and as the picture progressed, his character was not...
Both of them did a good job, because Sean Penn, who, as we've said before, is one of the best actors around right now, he is so filled with venom and so filled with this coiled up tension that he's gotten from all of these months in the jungle, all of these months of living under the constant threat of death, that he is able to absolutely impose his will on the others, and he convinces us that he could do that. There's a scene where he's shaving before he's about to go out for his last night, and the way he shaved had me on the edge of my seat, as if he were going to take that razor and do something else with it, or even cut himself.
Yeah, I figured he was going to cut himself. Let's talk about the a moral point of the film, which is said very directly into the camera, basically, by Michael Fox, where he says that because a soldier can die any moment, that is not a reason for him to be less human, but rather to be more human, more moral.
Yes.
I don't know that that applies in the battlefield conditions, but I know it applies in life.
Well, the amazing thing about this movie is how it really asks each one of us to ask the question, how would you behave in a situation like that? Would I have been any braver than the Fox character? No.
No, I wouldn't.
I think I would have been totally intimidated by Penn and these other three people.
I did testify at a court-martial, though I will tell you this. I did testify. I must give myself a little credit. I actually, I was at jeopardy of being sent into...
Well, the one thing I would have preferred about this movie, to just tell the story and leave off the prologue and the epilogue.
I want to repeat, it is a small-scale, narrow story, one person, not a big extravaganza like Apocalypse Now. Our next film is a lame-brain hippie comedy set in the same time, 1969. It's called Rude Awakening, and it fails completely as a comedy and then tries a last-minute turnabout as a save-the-planet message movie, and that's a real embarrassing mix. Cheech Marin from Cheech and Chong and Eric Roberts play a couple of hippies who in 1969 flee to the Central American jungle, where 20 years later they stumble upon a CIA plot for a U.S. invasion.
Take this. Destroy it. Don't let him use it. Don't use it against him. Who? Do it for your country. Oh, wow. Is he dead, man? He's very dead.
Those papers detail the CIA plan, and the boys decide to go back to the United States, to New York, to tell the world. They've missed a lot in 20 years. Their girlfriend, Julie Haggerty, tells them all about it.
You missed everything. Watergate, Ford, Carter, the hostage crisis, Jonestown, 3 Mile Island. All in the Family, MASH, Maude, Mary Hartman. Wars! Star Search, Battle of the Network Stars, Saturday Night Live. Men who hate women and the women who love them.
Another hippie friend of theirs who has turned into a yuppie is played by Robert Carradine.
I own tanning salons.
Oh.
I mean, people pay me to get a tan.
Oh. Wow. Hey, how do you get the sun to shine just on those guys who pay, man?
The jokes are predictable. There's no dark edge or seriousness to the material, which could make, in theory, I guess, a good movie. Julie Haggerty's whining voice is annoying. So is Cheech Marin's constant "hey man" dialogue, and Eric Roberts' much too earnest acting. I think one of the reasons the actors overdid their lines in this picture is that the lines are so empty and trivial. But saying them louder only makes Rude Awakening that much more difficult to watch. It's a awful film.
I think it's worse than that. I think it's one of the worst films, not just of 1989, but of certainly one of the worst films of the 20 years since 1969. This movie is a bad idea from beginning to end, and it's not even one idea. You put your finger on it. There are two different movies here. First, it's kind of a Cheech and Chong comedy. Then it turns into really embarrassing stuff about the ozone layer and AIDS and crack and all the other
problems. In the last 10 minutes, it's flipped in.
Yeah. The last 10 minutes are just awful, including the fact that you catch this when those students turn up and say, "Hey, we want to follow you." Right. There was no logical way they could have known where to find those people in order to turn up and turn themselves into them.
And also the way they just stand around, and you can see the kids acting. I mean, they're pretty...
Oh, just they're standing there as witnesses to this wonderful revival that hasn't taken place. This movie is agonizingly bad in terms of dialogue, acting, directing, and basically in terms of conception from beginning to end. It's just a bad idea. It should have never been made.
Well, in theory, you could make a picture about hippies hidden away and coming back. But it should have been a much darker film and a little, you know, maybe poke. The easy way to go is to make the hippies right. Maybe go the other way.
This summer we've had all of this 20th anniversary of Woodstock stuff, and really the basic thing to do if you want to observe that is go back and look at Woodstock. Right. Because all of the movies and all of the entertainments about what happened 20 years ago all seem to ring kind of false this summer. I think maybe 20 years ago isn't long enough. Maybe the 50th anniversary will be the time to do this.
If you think about it, the hippie movies that were made in the early 70s, like RPM, they weren't very good either. Okay, coming up next, John Candy is the bachelor uncle called in to supervise 3 suburban kids in Uncle Buck.
You have much more hair on your nose than my dad.
How nice of you to notice.
This movie is named Uncle Buck, and it stars John Candy as a character similar to the one he played in that wonderful 1987 comedy named Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Both movies directed by the same man, John Hughes. In this one, Candy is a large, shabby, unemployed, good-hearted bachelor, kind of lonely, and when his brother calls and asks a favor, he's happy to agree. The brother and sister-in-law have got to leave town on a family emergency, they tell him, and they need somebody to babysit with their 3 kids. Well, not surprisingly, the kids aren't too thrilled with their new authority figure, and they give Candy a hard time right from the first morning.
He put onions in the eggs.
I'm gonna go check on Maisie.
I'll fix you some cereal when I get back.
The most scornful of the kids is the 15-year-old played by Gene Kelly. She's humiliated by everything about Candy, especially his car.
Tying your shoe? What time do you want me to pick you up after school?
Don't bother, I'll get a ride with friends.
Eventually, Candy is able to bring the smaller kids around. They're fascinated by his approach.
Did you brush your teeth?
Yeah, I could even feel my toothbrush.
You know, I have a friend who works at the crime lab at the police station. I could give him your toothbrush, and he could run a test on it to see if you actually brushed your teeth or just ran your toothbrush under the faucet.
As I mentioned, Uncle Buck was written and directed by John Hughes, who has made about 10 movies involving young people and family life in the Chicago suburbs. His titles include The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Uncle Buck is on the same familiar turf, but there's something a little strange about the film. It wants to be funny and warm-hearted, but at the same time, it has a dark undercurrent, and there are scenes where the kindly uncle goes after the teenager's boyfriend with a power drill and then locks him in a car trunk and tapes his hands together with construction tape. It's strange the way this movie generates creepy feelings that work against everything it's trying to do. By the end of the movie, I wasn't sure that I would want Uncle Buck living in my suburb with me if I lived in the suburb.
Well, actually, I like the darker material more than the sweet, predictable namby-pamby stuff. I mean, to have the kids suddenly be transformed by Uncle Buck into being better mannered, and to have Uncle Buck become transformed by the kids into being willing to finally propose marriage to Amy Madigan, that's nothing special.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
that's
could see that coming a long way down
That's
the road.
TV sitcom.
Yeah.
I like the dark stuff. You know, things like that movie Neighbors and stuff like that. I mean, I like the dark quality in the suburbs. If the film had been more consistent in that way, with Uncle Buck being totally disruptive to the suburban environment, that would have been exciting.
I was thinking about Neighbors also when I looked at this movie, but the problem was there didn't seem to be, Hughes didn't seem to know which way he wanted to go, and so what you have is this upbeat kind of material with this undercurrent that seemed to be pulling against it. So both of it, I guess we agree that in one way or another the movie is
it's going in two
parts that don't fit.
Right. I have courage, and I love to see movies generally more dark than they are. Coming up next, Deep Sea Adventure featuring Ed Harris, Mary Elizabeth Mastro Antonio, and an alien life force in the abyss.
It was a machine. It was a machine, but it was alive. It was like
High-tech underwater adventure film called The Abyss, and it's really two stories, and we're getting a lot of picture that have two elements, and they don't blend well together, but one of them I think is very good. That's the story of an attempt to remove the nuclear missiles from a sunken atomic submarine. Leading the attempt are a couple of married and feuding undersea oil rig workers played by Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
I was worried about the rig. I've got over 4 years invested in this project.
Yeah, you only had 3 years invested in me.
Well, you have to have priorities.
Underwater, the two of them have to deal with their crew, one of whom is paranoid about both the American and Russian military.
You know, we've got Russian subs creeping around. Anything goes wrong down here, they can say whatever they want happen. Give the folks medals.
Relax, will you? You're making the women nervous.
Cute, Virgil.
But he's not completely paranoid, as the couple finds out when an American officer attacks them in a mini-sub.
Go to the right, swing to the right.
The underwater action is terrific, but the film goes aground when it tries for profundity with a close encounter with an E.T. clone.
I seem to be having a problem here.
The alien story really splits this movie in two, turning it from a hard-edged drama into a fairy tale that doesn't stand up by comparison with either Close Encounters, E.T., or 2001. Still, I enjoyed the main part of the movie, the claustrophobic tension underwater. I recommend it with a strong reservation about the creature from Beyond. I wish they just dumped that whole idea.
I didn't mind The Creature from Beyond because it seemed to me that what it gave us was another level of fun for a movie that is basically a lot of fun, and I enjoyed this movie. When you said it was two stories, I thought you were going to say that the other story was the relationship between Harris and Master Antonio, whether or not they'll get back together again.
Oh, that I know.
But I enjoyed that when she's trying to talk him through his, when he's going to have a panic attack when he's down at 40,000 feet.
That part I liked.
Deep he was. This movie has great special effects.
Yes, it does.
Convinced me that we were underwater.
Yes, it did.
And you could see what was happening. Oftentimes they try to fudge underwater movies by putting everything in a big cloud of sand or something so that you can't see that it's only models or something. This movie looked good, and I thought it was very exciting. I thought the ending, of course,
cheap.
I mean, we could have taken the last 5 minutes and just not had them.
But didn't even look cheap. Yeah, I mean, like it was photographed on bad stock or something.
The ending was not the best part of the movie, but I enjoyed it. Another thing I liked, it was produced by this woman, Gail Ann Hurd, who also made Aliens, which starred Sigourney Weaver. And it's the same idea, which is that the action character, the leader of the group, is a woman. And that provides a whole different dynamic for the whole crew that is interesting. It makes a lot of the cliches seem a little fresher.
Yeah, but the problem is that the woman, at least in this case, I think, acts so macho that it gets a little corny.
Well, if you were the boss of an undersea oil rig and you were a woman, wouldn't you act a little macho when you're down there?
I probably would, but I'm watching it as a movie and I'm seeing it's a little bit out there. The problem for me is, I say, the alien stuff. Wouldn't you have liked the picture better if they hadn't had aliens down there and just spent more time with the rescue?
I just think they just put in another element that was more fun.
It doesn't work
added to
for
the
me.
fun. Coming up next, Anthony Hopkins and Jeremy Irons, two of Britain's best actors, play members of an amateur acting company in A Chorus of Disapproval.
I call her my Swiss Army wife. No man should be without one.
Our next movie is based on a London stage hit by Alan Ayckbourn called A Chorus of Disapproval, and it tells the story of jealousy and intrigue within an amateur acting society in the British seaside town of Scarborough. An out-of-towner, played by Jeremy Irons, turns up one day and auditions for a part in a local amateur theatrical production, and in the local pub after the auditions, he meets some of the members of the troupe, including the company Sexpot.
You've no idea what a pleasure it is to see a new man in the society.
The director of the amateur company is a cantankerous Welshman played by Anthony Hopkins, who makes a specialty of offending people. At a rehearsal, he chews out one of his hapless amateur actors.
Ted, that is cut! That was cut 2 days ago!
Sorry, I don't have it.
No, you don't have anything, Ted. That's your trouble, man. You don't have any ability. You don't have any intelligence. You don't have one single scrap of artistic sensibility.
Meanwhile, Jeremy Irons falls passionately in love with Hopkins' wife, played by Prunella Scales.
Oh, good afternoon. Sorry to bother you.
My name's Llewellyn. Is Mr. Jones at home by any chance?
Yes, he is. Won't you come in?
A Chorus of Disapproval is sort of a disjointed movie that tells so many different stories that none of them really involve us. There's the other local couple, for example, that's in the wife swapping, and there's the intrigue over a local real estate deal. There's the complicated relationship between Hopkins and Irons, and there's the progress of the play they're putting on. And all of these elements, none of these elements really ever feel quite real. They all seem like jigsaw puzzles that have been put together for the convenience of the plot. This movie feels as if it were written. It doesn't feel as if it were happening. The thing is that here are all these people gambling with their lives and their happiness, and the movie didn't really make me care about any of them.
No, and I had difficulty accepting Anthony Hopkins in his role. Jeremy Irons was fine, and I think he's a really special actor, and I bought him in character, but I didn't buy Anthony Hopkins. It seemed to be such a caricature of the guy. I mean, even when you see him the very first time and he's wearing his little overcoat on and it's all tight and buttoned and it's indoors and he's walking around with, I thought, I mean, it's an actor's choice. It didn't work for me at all. I didn't buy him, and I thought there was so much emphasis placed on the play when I really wanted to know about these people's lives. The play was just a conceit. I didn't buy it at all.
Well, Hopkins is a really good actor at finding various details to make a character into a character, but here what I think is he found the details, he didn't ask if they fit the character. He's got that kind of stoop-shouldered look, and you're right about his clothes. They're all too tightly buttoned, and so he walks around like a little sausage, you know, sort of giving us all of this bitter Welsh wisdom and invective, and it goes over the top. You begin to realize that nobody else in this town will put up with that indefinitely the way they apparently do in this movie.
Yeah, it's a minor film. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this show. 2 thumbs up for Brian De Palma's Casualties of War, a small but pointed Vietnam story featuring strong performances by both Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox. 2 thumbs down, way down, for the hippie comedy Rude Awakening, bad acting and an insufferable script. 2 more thumbs down for Uncle Buck, starring John Candy as a crumb bum but wise uncle. The film could have used more dark moments. 2 thumbs up for The Abyss. We both really admired the underwater action. I, however, didn't care for the alien creature that makes its supporting appearance. And 2 thumbs down for A Chorus of Disapproval, the small-town English comedy that is too contrived for its own good. So we both like The Abyss and
Casualties of War, except what I can understand is why you keep emphasizing that it's a small movie or it's a small-scale movie. I mean, it's as big as it needs to be in order to tell this very, very important story about this dynamic involving these people. It's not a small movie in that sense at all. And it probably was a pretty expensive movie, too.
I don't care about money. I'm simply talking about the scope of the picture, because I think when people hear Vietnam, I think they automatically, and hear these big names, they automatically think it's going to be a big-scale picture, and they may be disappointed if they don't find it that way.
I think they'd be more disappointed if it were a bad picture, actually, and that's not going to
Who's going to argue with that?
Not you, apparently. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back to review The Package, a thriller starring Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones, and Cookie with Peter Falk, Diane Wiest, and Emily Lloyd. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.